Good morning, brothers and sisters in Christ. Thank you for tuning in. Mary, good morning.
Good morning.
We want to remind you, if you are in Northeast Wisconsin, there is a very important film documentary at the De Pere Cinema, Get Real Cinema, this Sunday, 1:15 p.m. It's our dear friend Scott Schara, Grace's dad, the founder of Our Amazing Grace's Light Shines On, Incorporated, and it's called Breaking the Oath. And, of course, Scott has a lawsuit against the hospital administrators for the murder of his daughter, Grace, 19, due to COVID protocols. You can get all the information. You can hear some amazing interviews at this presentation Sunday afternoon. Again, 1:15 p.m. in De Pere. That's on George Street. And it's at 1:15, and then there's going to be people that are from the documentary there to do a Q&A at the end after the documentary is over. So again, Breaking the Oath, the premiere is this Sunday afternoon, De Pere, Wisconsin, right next to Green Bay. AmericaFirstProductions.com. First is 1ST. AmericaFirstProductions.com. You can get info. Again, there's seats remaining. So Scott Schara and his story, go to the recent podcast we did, I think this Monday or Tuesday. And America, 1ST, which is First, Productions.com. Our guest today has a brand new book out. It's called New World Order. And we are blessed to talk with Pete Garcia again. He's a retired military combat veteran and aviator, writer, researcher, speaker, teacher of Bible prophecy and apologetics. And he still has time to eat and sleep. He's a graduate of the U.S. Army's prestigious Command and General Staff College. He was called by the Lord to start writing at 33, and some of you might remember he wrote for Jack Kinsella's The Omega Letter from 2011 to 2018, and he branched out. He writes, he speaks. We're just so blessed to have him on, and the book is phenomenal. Mary is raving about it. Pete Garcia, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, it's good to be back with you, Dave.
Hey, great book. There's so much to get into. So let's just kick it off with all the things that you could be writing out. And Terry James helped you with this as well. And there's so many topics. The foreword is done by Mondo Gonzalez. A lot of people have written about the New World Order, COVID, the Great Reset, and yet you guys decided to you particularly wrote most of the book. Why this book? Why now? And what new information can people get from it?
Well, I think it's definitely apropos for our time. There's been so much change happening so quickly over the last 20 years that I think that people, particularly Christians, that really hadn't really thought a lot about the world or the way things are going, have really had their worldview shaken, especially since 2020. Mm-hmm. And I think that it gives a lot of answers and reasons and kind of the story behind why things are happening the way they are. And we look at the events since 2020 as being very shocking, and the change has been so tremendous. But really, this is a long game. This has been going on for a very long time. Even before the founding of the United States, but. What Terry and I tried to do was just kind of chronicle where this began, and then kind of speed through the previous 2,000 years, and then really kind of focus on the 20th century and where we are now, 21st century, and not just where we are now, but where things are going, and where things will ultimately end up, the final world order with Jesus Christ ruling and reigning forever.
Pete, it's just a pleasure to talk to you today. You start out at the beginning talking about the First World Order, and I don't think of the garden as a world order, but it really, really was. And it didn't take long. We don't know how long, but it didn't take long for the world to become completely degenerate due to sin. The days of Noah, the thoughts of men's heart were only evil continually. And what did that look like? Are we going to find out what that looks like? You say it was the vilest world order of all, and judgment fell. Well, what happened after that? Because there would have been people around who remembered the flood, or who were told about the flood. Their ancestors were killed in the flood. What happened after that? Tell us a little bit about that guy named Nimrod.
Well, certainly, Noah and his wife, and then his three sons and their wives, were the only world, the only inhabitants of the world, shortly after the flood. And as they journeyed from the east, as it talks there in Genesis 11, they settled somewhere, in my opinion, somewhere in northwest Iraq, it would be northeast Syria. And they settled there. They would have had children. They would have passed on this information to their children, what the world was like beforehand. And we just know from normal geography how stories become embellished over time, and then true stories that become embellished, eventually become myths and mythologies and legends. And so there became this great mythology or mythos about the world before, and it became what people, cultures around the world began to view as the golden age of man, where man was nearly immortal, and they had great strength, great intelligence. They lived for centuries. And really, when you think about secret societies and you think about all of these pseudo-religious organizations that, whether pagan or Luciferian or whatever, they are always promising that. They're promising that to take man back to the Garden of Eden, take man back to this paradisical age of near immortality. And we've seen, obviously, culture, entertainment today embellish that through superheroes and vampires and all kinds of things like that. But that's where they promised to take man for all these years. Well, shortly after the flood, you have a couple of generations go by. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and one of his sons, Ham, had a son named Cush. And it talks about how Cush, it lists out his sons, and then it separates this guy named Nimrod out, separate from the other sons. So Nimrod stands different, even from the get-go. We see his story unfold in Genesis 10, and he is a founder of cities, and he is a great mighty hunter before the Lord. And some of the translations, it should say against the Lord. He was a hunter of men. And then in some cases, I believe in the Septuagint, he is listed as a giant. So he could have been some kind of a Nephilim or something like that. I don't know, and it's kind of almost irrelevant to the point. But the point that we want to make is that he was against God, and he was really the world's first tyrant, the first world dictator. And when you think about it, he's the only guy in all of history that has ruled all the world all at once. The whole population. Because of the how small the population was at the time, and eventually between him and his wife Semiramis, he began the first world dictatorship, and then she began the first world religion. So when we think about the phrase that we see in Revelation 17, the whore of Babylon, the mother of harlots, that is where it all goes back to. It all goes back to Babel, where the whole world was united. And God, in his mercy, separated mankind because he knew that if mankind remained united, and he says it there in Genesis 11, that there wouldn't be anything withheld from them. And mankind would have probably destroyed itself a long time ago had man remained united under one language, under one leadership, one kind of style of governance. So God separates mankind, and that is act as a form of restraint against satanic control, in the millennia sense.
Yes, and he blocked the entrance to the Garden of Eden, too, for whatever reason God had to do that. But you also mention in the book about access that humans may have had to a different dimension or different spiritual portals, and that this tower actually represented the golden age of some sort of access to a different realm. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, we when we talk about different dimensions and different portals and things like that, that all sounds very science fiction and everything. But if we look at some of the megalithic structures and the ancient sites that we see around the world, there's some places that defy our understanding of how they did it. Some of these stones are so massive, or the stones are not original to that location where they're set up, and there's so many of them, and they're arrayed at such an altitude or an elevation, like up on a mountain or something, that it really defies our understanding of how ancient cultures did that. Modern science and modern academia has sold the public a bill of goods that the ancients were brutish and stupid and knuckle-dragging Neanderthals. Well, the truth is that before the flood, mankind was incredibly intelligent, and that as mankind, if you think about it this way, Adam was created perfect. He was perfect genetically, perfect in every way, shape, or form. He was the perfect human before he fell. But even when he fell, his offspring would have been the next genetic perfection, and then their generation. And we're so many generations removed. It's like if you took a copy of a picture. If you took a picture and you put it through a photocopier and you scanned it, and then you took that copy and then you made a copy of that, and then you keep doing that over and over and over, eventually that picture is going to be unrecognizable. And that's where we are today. We're kind of like this copy, 40 times removed from the beginning. Well, we know today that there are still remaining archaeological megalithic structures and sites around the world that defy our understanding. So there must have been some kind of technology that's been lost. There's been there's been stuff that's been lost that we just don't understand how they did these things and how they knew these things. So it's very likely that the Tower of Babel, amongst other things, was served as some gateway back to their attempt, at least to try and reach back to the old ways before the flood, because angels and other entities began to interact with humans in ways that we see there in Genesis 6. We know the Bible says the sons of God interacted with humans. These are the fallen sons of God, the fallen angels begin to take wives and things like that. So it's likely that Nimrod and them were trying to tap back into that, or try to find some way to reconnect back to the way to get forbidden knowledge again.
Interesting.
Wow. That's fascinating, Pete. And by the way, friends, if you just tuned in and didn't catch the very beginning, we're talking with author Pete Garcia. The brand new book is called New World Order, the subtitle, Worlds in Collision and the Rebirth of Liberty. So I want to jump to what direct correlations then, in light of what you just explained, can we draw from Babel, the Babel account in Genesis 11, to the Great Reset and the New World Order?
Well, I mean, if we think about what Satan's long game is, it's to get the world, united back under one system that he controls. And if you read Luke 4, chapter 4, when Jesus is in the wilderness, the temptations in the wilderness, one of the temptations that Satan tries to get Jesus to succumb to is to worship him. And he says something very interesting here that often gets overlooked. And it says, then, and this is Luke 4, 5 and 5 through 7, he says, then the devil, taking him up on a high mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And the devil said to him, all this authority I will give you, and their glory, for this has been delivered to me, and I give it to whomever I wish. Therefore, if you will worship me, all will be yours. So to whatever degree, we know that Satan is God's devil. God created him, and ultimately God has the authority over not just nations, as it says in Acts 17:26, but over just everything, the whole structure, the whole. If we think about the flow of time, think about it as a river, and God has allowed Satan to go back and forth from bank to bank in a little kayak or something, and he can kind of maneuver within the banks of this river, but the river is still pushing him in a general direction, right? And so now Satan has had this put on the minds of man to unite, and so for the last 2,000 years, he's tried several different mechanisms. He tried religion. He's tried empires, right? The Roman Empire and all the empires that were listed in Daniel chapter 2 with the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, the multi-metallic statue that listed all the subsequent Gentile empires. But he's tried religion. He's tried, for instance, Roman Catholicism dominated most of the world, the known world from about the 5th century through the 15th century. And now we've come to this age where technology has become really this new medium by which he is seeking to gain control. And obviously we know that that's the way it's going to happen, because Revelation, in particular Revelation 11, Revelation 13, and 17, talk about technologies that will be used in the beast kingdom. And for 2,000 years, theologians and students and scholars and just people that were reading Revelation, the book of Revelation, could scratch their head, and they're like, how can one man control everything through this mark? And most people for generations just thought it was some kind of a tattoo. Well, a tattoo on an individual in, let's say, Nepal, or how does that control somebody or connect to somebody in Brazil? So there has to be some type of pragmatic, functioning technology that goes into this mark, and we're the first generation that's had that. So I know that this is kind of, we're going back to this Tower of Babel moment where technology is going to unite mankind, not necessarily willingly, but through force.
Wow. And I keep thinking of that phrase, the days of Noah, because now that we've covered the early days, which sort of piques your interest, what was it really like? Well, now when Jesus says it's going to be like the days of Noah, now that really gets my mind going. And you have a chapter called The Illusion of Modernity. And in the early 1900s, it seems like life kind of went along low tech, no tech for a long time. All of a sudden, you have the fall of the empires in Europe. You have nation states rising to the top. You have 2 world wars. We have technology. I mean, somebody flipped a switch. Israel became a nation. The EU, came together the same year, and something really, really happened. What is this illusion of modernity? Can you tell us a little bit more about what you were thinking when you wrote that chapter?
Well, it's I really got the inspiration from that, I guess, was from a guy named Norman Angel, or I don't know how to say his last name properly, but he wrote a book in 1910 called The Great Illusion. And he was trying to make the case that through industrialization and modernization, capitalism, it would disincentivize war amongst modern nations. And this book came out in 1910, and it was, gained wide circulation. And in 1913, it was, one of the, I think the Economist heralded it and said, war has become impossible in the civilized world. Well, obviously the next year, the world enters World War I. And then for the next 4 years, most of Europe was engulfed in this horrific war between the Central and Axis powers. And I thought, all of these things that we, champion as this is going to fix society, it doesn't. It just makes things worse. And in fact, I don't know if this is a real word or not. I use a complexify. It complexifies everything. And if we think back to when we were younger, when you were kids, think about how simple things were, and how much easier the world seemed. I mean, your taxes, you could do it on one sheet of paper. You got a paycheck. You just took it to the bank and you cashed it, and that's what you had. You took out the money you needed, and gas was 30 cents a gallon or whatever. When I was growing up, gas was right around. I want to say it was about 90 cents a gallon, 95 cents a gallon. This is in the late 80s. And so, the world was simpler then. And as we've continued on, the world's become increasingly more complex. And all of this complexity is sold to us as, this is going to make life easier. We think about email. Well, if anybody's worked in a modern office, they realize that email has become this great ball and chain. It just traps people to a desk or to an iPhone or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's an illusion, but this illusion is increasingly trapping mankind. When the Patriot Act was sold to the world to America in 2001, the fall of 2001, it passed. It passed as a law 30 days, almost to the day after 9/11, and it was promised to make us safer. And we've seen this abuse of this and how much this technology has really become a snare around our neck with the surveillance state and the intelligentsia gaining all kinds of powers that they didn't have prior to. So that's the illusion in it. And the illusion is that eventually this technology which was sold to us as making the world better, is ultimately going to ensnare the world. And this is what the beast kingdom uses to control everybody on the planet.
Will it be a combo? And the end game, is it a combo of AI plus the supernatural? Days of Noah kind of thing?
I believe it will be, yeah. I believe that, well, first of all, there's technology is moving really, really rapidly, but it's moving rapidly amongst a bunch of different disciplines. So AI is one discipline, and you've got a bunch of different agencies pushing that. You've got quantum computing advancing along another way. And I ultimately think that it's going to be AI that's powered by a quantum system, because quantum is so much more powerful than our standard supercomputers. And you're going to need, if you're going to control the whole world through one system, you're going to need a system that's most powerful enough to be able to process all that information. Trillions of interactions in a second. Every second, you're going to need a system that can handle that. And the thing about quantum systems that are intriguing is that, even going back to Albert Einstein, he called it spooky action at a distance. He didn't understand how quantum mechanics worked or quantum physics worked, but he knew it worked, and Chuck Missler, noted that as well later, decades later. He has a quote that says, it's impossible as it seems, and as crazy as it seems, it works. We just understand that it works. We don't know how it works, but it does. Well, this is where I believe the rapture and the removal of the ministry of the Holy Spirit's ministry of restraint all kind of comes into play, where things are being held at bay. We've plateaued with regards to technology. We've plateaued. And we do this every so many decades. Technology will go along, and then eventually it plateaus, and then some new breakthrough thing comes through, and then that skyrockets for a little bit, and then it plateaus. And so I think we're in this kind of plateau right now that won't really begin to take off again until after the rapture of the church.
Interesting.
We're speaking with Pete Garcia, and the book is called New World Order, available on Amazon. You can go to also Pete's website, a phenomenal website if you want to get more information on his ministry, his articles. It's rev310.net. That's rev310.net. Okay, Pete, chapter 7. We've got many guests, one in particular, J.B. Hickson, talks a lot about the Antichrist spirit of the age and Luciferianism. Well, you've got a chapter called The Luciferian Agenda, and you say Luciferianism in actuality is a belief system that venerates Lucifer as the morning star or light bearer and regards him as either the hero or the anti-hero in the human drama. And you start off the chapter with a fascinating quote, and a lot of people aren't familiar with Saul Alinsky. There's a book called Rules for Radicals, and in that book he dedicated it to Satan. By the way, Pete, I know you know this. This book was on the recommended reading list on the National Education Association website for many, many years. Rules for Radicals for the teachers' unions and the teachers on their website. Here, I'm going to read the quote and let you share the importance of this chapter and what you talk about in Luciferianism. Now, this is the book Rules for Radicals. Saul Alinsky said, "Lest we forget at least an over-the-shoulder acknowledgement to the very first radical. From all our legends, mythology, and history, and who is to know where mythology leaves off and history begins? The first radical known to man who rebelled against the establishment and did it so effectively that he at least won his own kingdom, Lucifer." So Saul Alinsky dedicates his book, Rules for Radicals, to Lucifer. A lot of people on the left, these are their marching orders, this Rules for Radicals. Make this connection with us in the Luciferian agenda.
Well, the most successful lie, obviously, that the devil's perpetuated on the world is to convince the world that he doesn't exist. So this idea of Lucifer, even to a guy like Saul Alinsky, he doesn't really believe in the devil. He might, I don't know if he's still alive or he's dead or not, but these guys don't believe in the devil as we understand him. They see it as some kind of an anti-hero system that they can gain the whole world. That they sell their soul to the devil, that phrase, and they gain the whole world. And for them, it's really materialism. It's materialism and humanism, and this idea that we can become as gods. And Lucifer sells this facade to them, and he sold it to Adam and Eve. When the garden, when he told Eve, God doesn't want you to eat this thing because as soon as you eat of this forbidden fruit, you'll become like him. And he's been selling that same lie ever since. And so it's just interesting to me that Luciferianism has had a kind of a negative connotation over, at least in the church age in the last 2,000 years. But now it's become in vogue. It's become hip. It's become something that's being marketed, by Lil Nas X and all these other celebrities that are doing the pyramid eye, and they're doing the satanic symbols, and even at the last I can't remember if it was the Grammys or one of the music shows where the guy comes out dancing, in red and dressed up as the devil.
Satanic.
It's very much in vogue now, and basically it kind of goes along the line that these guys have sold their souls to basically gain material wealth in the present. And it's sad. It's such a sad state of affairs that and it speaks to the blindness that we are in now. And I've kind of phrased, I don't know if it's unique to me, I call it the Antichrist zeitgeist.
What?
The spirit
the what?
It's the spirit of the age.
The zeitgeist. I was looking at the word when you said it, which is really weird.
The Antichrist zeitgeist.
Zeitgeist, yes.
Yeah, and it's become in vogue to the occult has become in vogue again, and I think that really speaks to the decline of Christianity within the United States, and then as the U.S. Obviously it's declined in Europe a long time ago. They're about 20, 30 years ahead of us, spiritually speaking, but. That's why we see the rise in paganism and the rise in postmodern truth, where I think Charlie Kirk said, if you have many gods, you have many truths, and many moralities. And that's why the church is being diminished these days, even in communities. We've lost the platform on mainstream news a long time ago, but even within communities, you've got 16 different kinds of religion in one small city. Well, then who has the authority? And the only way to gain any kind of leverage back over the community is if all the groups come together. They set aside all their differences in some kind of ecumenical mishmash of camaraderie, and then they come together to fight some kind of topic, like climate change or poverty or some other thing. But you're having to diminish and water down your own beliefs and differences in order to come together. So either way you look at it, Satan is taking advantage of this. And so we have the rise of paganism, the diminishment of Christianity within the United States, which, nations aren't Christian. There's no nation that is a Christian nation necessarily, but we were founded on Christian principles and Christian ideals and Christian morals and values that the Pilgrims had when they came here in 1620, and it was later codified into the Constitution. And really, I'm not trying to venerate the Constitution as divine or anything, but it is definitely inspired.
Yes,
and it's been effective to thwart this push, this race for globalism for almost 250 years now, and that's why we see the attack on it, constantly in every form. And Satan and his demonic hordes, which number probably in the billions, are relentless in this. They are relentless. They never stop. They don't sleep. They don't take siestas. They don't, they are relentless in their attack on it. And that's why it's incumbent upon us believers to constantly be in prayer and battling in prayer, because that's the weapons of our warfare, as Paul says.
More with Pete Garcia and the book New World Order when we come right back on Stand Up for the Truth.